Right, the definitive MMA violence scale. We've got a scale here, and on one end are fighters that are so violent that they've got Jon Jones's wife thinking it's date night, and on the other end is fighters whose style is about as aggressive as a Beanie Baby. Right, now we'll start with the two that were on the thumbnail. So on one end, we've got Justin Gaethje, probably the first name on most fans' lips when asked about violent or exciting fighters. He might have evolved a little bit since his early chaotic fights, but he's still an absolute savage. And then, all the way down on the other end, is Ryan Hall. Not only does he have the demeanour of a Jehovah's Witness, but his most aggressive attack involves him doing a roly-poly. Tony Ferguson. Look, if you're new to MMA, you're going to have a different view on who you think Tony Ferguson is. But if you've been around for a while, for the Boogeyman El Kukui days, you'll know that Tony is one wild, crazy, violent motherfucker. Colby. If words could hurt you, Colby might be right up there near the top. But as it is, Colby, as talented as he is at wrestling, and as good as his cardio is, with Colby, violence just isn't a word you think of. Even when he completely dominated Masvidal, it was skillful, yes. It was impressive, yes. But not particularly violent. Sean Strickland. Here's the thing, you guys. Sean is another one a bit like Colby. He talks a talk. If you only heard his press conferences, but never actually saw him fight, you'd think he was a killer. But no. After promising to bleed for you guys, he proceeds to go in there and mainly jab. Again, brilliant fighter, and I'm a fan. But today we're judging styles by violence. Unless it's the last 10 seconds of a fight, it's really not Sean's strong point. Nate Diaz. Right, this one's going to piss everyone off. I know a load of you old school ones can't get enough of the Diaz brothers. They were really cool and they smoke weed and all that. And yes, he's good at boxing. But most of the time, he just walks around the ring not looking at his opponent like he doesn't want to be there. He's hardly a knockout artist. I hate to say it, but he's a little bit style over substance. Zhang Weili, always up for a banger and always willing to go into deep waters. When it comes to the ladies, Weili is one of the most violent. Sean O'Malley, he might interview like he's overdosed on sleepy pills. But in the cage, he's actually really exciting. He might like bouncing around and picking his shots rather than biting down on his gun piece. But with those hands and those knockouts, there's no doubt that O'Malley has it. Jon Jones, here we go. Old Johnny boy. Look, in all seriousness, with all the domestic violence and eye pokes and illegal techniques, there's no denying that Jon Bone Pills Jones is a violent, nasty man. Islam Makhachev. Unlike his mentor, Islam has a much more exciting fighting style. He might be a little adverse to taking risks in the cage, but he can dish it and he can take it. And even though he's relatively early in his run, you got to admit, he's already had some bangers. Alex Pereira. The most dominant force to come into MMA in recent years. His style might be a bit tentative at times, but it's also devastating. Chase Hooper. Yes, he's grappling heavy, but after moving up a weight and continuing to work on his striking, old Chase is turning into a little bit of a firecracker. Ilia Topuria. Yes, he's reminiscent of a Ben Stiller villain, and he might be a bit of a Conor wannabe. But when it comes to violence, Ilia's got us covered. Nasty moves with vicious intent. And we love it. Dricus du Plessis. He might be a bit awkward and he might move around the cage like a pulled muscle, but he's always going after it and he's always happy to throw down. Aljamain, the human backsack and crack Sterling. He gets a hard time. Some of it's unfair, but when it comes to fighting, he only just managed to get TJ out of there when he had one arm. In most fights, the most you can hope for is a rear naked choke. Bilal Muhammad. Bilal is another one that struggles to excite. Famously, nearly all of his fights go to decision. And again, when he was fighting Gilbert, from halfway through the fight, Gilbert's left shoulder was absolutely destroyed. He was limping around like a poor little damaged squirrel, yet Bilal still couldn't get the finish. Tom Aspinall. Well, I think his average fight time in all of his UFC career so far is about 2 minutes, which should tell you everything you need to know. There's a reason that Jon Jones is shaking in his boots, and it's Tom Aspinall. Johnny Walker, the old Brazilian jumping bean himself. He's dished out some brutal knockouts, and he's been on the receiving end of some brutal knockouts. Either way, there's brutal knockouts. Khalil Roundtree. His aggressive Thai fighting style lends itself to violent, exciting fights. He's a bit of a serious, cringy waffle outside of the ring, but inside, he brings the action. Damian Maia. The man that put the final nail in Ben Askren's UFC run. That fight had some of the most epic striking I've ever seen, but not in a good way. Absolute bollocks. Vanderlei Silva, or as others know him, as Chris Cyborg when you take her wig off. He was always fun in the cage, guaranteed violence, which is obviously why you can't let him get close to you. Anthony Smith, UFC's answer to what if unlimited self-belief met slightly below average skill and talent. Ben Askren, We all got excited when Ben came over. Rogan hyped him right up. He was giving it all the big un. And then, boom. He did about as much damage as a fucking Care Bear. Brendan Allen. He's alright. Loves implementing his jiu-jitsu, but he still manages to blend in a little bit of carnage. Khamzat Chimaev. He might pull out after one round, worse than me on Valentine's night. But when he's going, he's going. Absolute nightmare for anyone standing opposite him. Chuck Liddell. What is there to say? He's one of the OGs of brutality. Paulo Costa. Whilst he doesn't actually seem to do much damage to his opponents, he does really dig those body shots in deep. And he's got crazy kick game for a man of his size and shape. And I still love to see him against Chimaev. I really hope we do. Ian Gary, that terrible personality, does seem to actually translate into some really nasty techniques. You've got to give it to the Mount. When it comes to in the cage, he can dish it out. Sean Brady, I've got to fill up this end a little bit more. Kevin Holland, funny guy, great striking, questionable grappling, happy to take on any challenge. Even though he's not always on the right side of it, his willingness to fight often leads to some entertaining violence. Charles Oliveira, you'd think with him being a jiu-jitsu guy that he wouldn't do well on this scale. But all he knows is the finish. Hunting the finish in every moment of every round of the fight. Often leaving him vulnerable, which makes his fights even more exciting. Beneil Dariush. Look, Beneil's a decent fighter, but you don't really think violence when you see him on a card. So sorry, Benny. Robbie Lawler. There you go. Robbie is the type of fighter that is made for this list. So many fights, so much savagery. Rafael Fiziev. You gotta love his style. Always fun, he ain't afraid of a tear-up, vicious striking. Renato Moicano. He's great on the mic, he's got a great personality, high-level jiu-jitsu. Sadly, he just doesn't bring the intensity into the cage. Dan Hooker. He ain't gonna be a world champion, and he ain't gonna win the MMA award for fight IQ. But he's always game, with a collection of performances already in his back catalogue that are about as violent as it gets. Merab Dvalishvili. An unlimited gas tank and relentless takedown attempts aren't what this scale is all about. I approve of the meme game and the funny skits, but not the most violent fighting style. Max Holloway. Yes, the iconic pointing down to the centre of the cage is what it's all about. Absolute animal. He's a BMF. What is there to say? Henry Cejudo. He's a funny little pickle, isn't he? As skilled and as accomplished as he is, he's just not really a particularly violent fighter. On the other hand, Michael Chandler is literally one of the most violent, with a preference for putting on a show for the fans. He's like a little eager puppy, and we get some fantastic fights because of it. And then Francis Ngannou, one of, if not the scariest MMA fighter of all time. So scary, John Jones went on walkabout for 2 years. And in fairness, I don't blame him. Absolute machine. So there you go. Let me know who I've missed and I might do a part 2. So I've done the hate scale, now I've done the violence scale. Let me know if there's another one you want to see. And if you like this video, give us a sub, check out this playlist of recent bangers. I'll see you next time.